right, everybody, welcome back to the Bet on C2C podcast. Welcome to week 8. We're trucking right along. I can't believe it's already week 8, already halfway through the season. Lots of stuff going on. Of course, I'm graced by one of my co-hosts, Mr. Chris K at Realist Chris K. You come onto the thing looking with the flannel. The hair's nice. You're just full fall right now. Really enjoying it. Welcome back to the show. You feeling better this week, sir?
I am for a week, and then I'm going to be out next week. I'm getting some a nose surgery, a nose job, and then I'm coming back looking better than that. I heard the comments and thoughts from the fans. They said my nose wasn't looking too hot, so I need to fix it for the fans. So here I am. I'm an avid just pleaser of the fans. So here I am.
Yep. Needless to say, but it's mainly the sinuses. We just want Chris to breathe, take deep breaths, relax, join some podcasts and stuff like that. But we also have a very special guest. First, we want to mention Ethan. He had some work this week, but he'll be back next week. So Ethan, get caught up, buddy. We'll see you next week. Excited for the article for sure. But we have our very special guest. Of course, I consider him a guru of spreadsheets. He is the owner and proprietor at CFB Winning Edge. He's my great friend, Nicholas Ian Adam. We just call him Nick. Nick, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hey, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely, man. How's the we've talked a little bit off the camera, but how's the season going? Projections? It sounds like a lot of the new changes are starting to pay off a little bit now.
Yeah, well, so there's two ways of going about it. My co-host and the CFB Winning Edge podcast, Scott Bogman, he I think took the better approach of building up a big lead early in the season, going 60% or close against the spread. I decided, you know what, we're just going to dig a giant hole and see if we can climb out of it. So, 3 of the first 4 weeks were pretty horrible. Last 3 weeks have been really quite good. So close to the surface here. But I don't know if, how many people out there are familiar with me or what I do or listen to the show. I've got 3 different projection models that one is kind of the one I've been doing the whole time. That's the official one I really pay the most attention to. But then I've got 2 others, one that kind of isolates talent numbers, one that isolates stats only, kind of give a different view of the 3. And I've started to like more and more what I've seen out of specifically that stats only model, which last week was almost 70%. So we're, building some momentum. We'll see if we can carry it through. But the last 3 weeks have definitely been better than the first 4, we'll say.
Yeah, 70% is very effective. That
won't happen.
I know.
Often, if ever again. But
not every single week.
But overall, I have liked what I've seen out of that particular model. I'm liking it more and more as we get into the season.
Yep. And we'll touch a little bit more on what Nick does on a daily basis and kind of go from there. Let's do some little, a quick, I call it homework, but we'll add it here as well. Of course, everything we have there is over at campusofcanton.com. Go check it out. Of course, our articles, tools, guides, different memberships, and so much more. Anything that you want to find from us, if you're having a hard time finding it, this is the website to go check it out. So please go check out campusofcanton.com. Plenty of articles. Of course, you have the NIL membership. Of course, you can see Chris's articles and Ethan's on there. Anything to do with DFS. Of course, our prize picks. You got Moxley doing his stuff in the morning times and things like that. You also have Alfred doing early lines and stuff like that. And just some of the, he calls it his sicko games, the small G5 games he likes to jump on there, regardless if it's during the half or early to begin with. But he's really into that. So go check that out. And then, of course, we have the in-season edge, which is going on in-season only. It's $29.99. Like I said, all gaming content's including. That's including DFS and prize picks as well. You get the first look at anything as far as like we're talking about in the actual Discord. So the Discord, we have our particular chats just for those. So definitely check that out. And everything from the scholarship level. So everything that you're getting as far as articles, tools that we're using and things like that, everything is still there as well. Of course, you also are getting a first look, just like everyone else in the NIL membership, as far as new tools and stuff like that. So whether that's the year 1-0 projections that Austin does or anything that Jarrett comes up, that's all available for you. So definitely go check that out. Of course, if you use the promo code C2C there over at Prize Picks, which we'll mention here in just a second, that's going to give you $20 off of this one. So really all you have to do is just pay $10 more and you can get this for the rest of the season. So a few more weeks to go. So if you're just trying to win you some cash and help you out, this is the way to go. And of course, like we just mentioned, use that promo code C2C. If anything, Prize Picks give you a match deposit up to $100. There were some free spaces. I hope you guys used the Steph Curry one. I think he's going to score more than half of a point because he's Steph Curry. So, you want to do that, but I hope you use that Dalton Kincaid because he went from 9.5 projected to 42 fantasy points. So, needless to say, if you did that too, you did good. Of course, Chris was talking a little smack offline that if you use that Chris Rodriguez prop, you would have hit your money too. So, if you did a flex 3, hopefully you made you some money there as well. But since we have the guest of honor, I wanted him to kind of talk about a little bit. Of course, I mentioned this in previous ones. I use his sometimes to look at my matchups, whether it's defense versus offense or O-line versus D-line, or maybe this wide receiver's got going up against a corner that's maybe a freshman and a little bit. But that's where Nick comes into play with his stuff here. Of course, it's patreon.com at CFB Winning Edge. You can get a leg up on the competition. Plus, everything is updated on the regular basis. So, Nick, why don't you just go a little bit more in detail, what does and what you do to change. I know you're constantly looking at injuries and things, so just tell the audience kind of what happens on a weekly basis that you update these things.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. The most of my stuff is personnel based. I have a set of Google Sheets. I have several sets of Google Sheets, too many. But the one I use the most is my FBS team profiles. If you are interested in joining us on Patreon, it's a tier 2 membership and offer opportunity for our supporters to access these. Have got rosters for all 130 teams, a lot of stats, a lot of recruiting information, production, experience stuff. Basically, I wanted to have everything at my fingertips, and I use individual player ratings based on talent and experience and production, use those to build position and unit ratings, and then build those into team ratings to project point spreads and things like that. Do have projected point spreads for every game throughout the course of the year. Those are updated constantly, so you can look a month in the future and see what we've got currently projected there. But as you mentioned, injuries, as we all know, in college football and certainly for DFS and CFF, it's really, really difficult a lot of times to keep up to date everything injury wise. And I'm certainly not perfect, but a big part of my day-to-day duties basically are scrolling through Twitter and Discord as much as I can to see what sort of injury updates I can find. Make adjustments in the sheets. If a guy's going to be, doubtful to play, that may change how the projection goes, because I can kind of, say, oh, well, maybe we'll give him, instead of full-time starter projected, value, we can limit that a little bit. But anyway, injury stuff, personnel stuff, do have matchups, like you said, for the units, O-line, D-line, and receivers versus DBs, all that good stuff. So too much I'm not very good at the elevator pitch. I've never quite got it down. So very long and rambling answer. But if you have any questions, I'm pretty easy to find on Twitter. Always happy to answer questions and show examples of some of the things that we offer.
Nick, you do a lot of returning offensive line type stuff, right? I think that's something he's shaking his head up and down, by the way. I think that's something in the off season is huge, right?
Yes.
There's a ton of benefit. As much as talent matters in college football, there's so much that can go in a system. And then I think also returning production, and that especially includes offensive line, defensive line type of thing. So I've always found your stuff fascinating when you tweet it out and post the graphs and the charts and the where this position group ranks and that type of thing. I think it's awesome and a huge off season help for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it. A big chunk of the work is off season stuff. I mean, I try to get basically every player that's on the roster, at least every scholarship player, and the transfer portal, of course, makes things. I make adjustments based on that, and that factors into returning production. And a lot of it is off-season based, and try to keep up as best I can in season. But yeah, for sure, returning production is a big piece of it, and hopefully, find little bits and pieces of information here and there that can help apply to, things like preseason win totals and yardage, over-unders, full season, all that good stuff. But also try to, keep it updated best we can in season when things are really flying. But a lot of that legwork, definitely goes in the long months of the off season.
Can I ask, what's the what kind of difference are we seeing in like these projected totals? Or I should say, are you doing projected spreads of games? Like, what do you have the Tennessee Georgia game at right now? Because I'm very curious. That seems like a fun one to know, right?
It's very
yeah. So
you do that, and then my follow up would be, what's out of pure curiosity, because it's impossible to, like, you could say I'm right 20% of the time and be like, damn, that's pretty good. So don't feel bad. But I'm very curious, like, how close are you hitting? Are you like fascinated by how close, or and sometimes I guess how wrong you could be, because it's just so crazy in the CFB world?
Yeah. So first, the Georgia Tennessee, November 5th. That game is in Athens. I've currently in our official traditional model have Georgia as a 9.74 point favorite, 71% win expectancy. Our talent edge, which is strip out everything, all the stats and all that sort of stuff, and just based on the talent, the experience, and production to date for the full roster, has Georgia favored by just a little over 6 points, 6.05. Our stats only model, the one I mentioned that I have liked more and more over the course of the year, I call it Prism, so projected scoring margin. It's set up in a similar way, if people are familiar with SP Plus and things like that. That's more the kind of the model that it works on. That actually has Georgia as over a 2-touchdown favorite, so 14.86. So
wow,
my numbers I thought were pretty high on Tennessee coming into the year. They were in the top 10 in my preseason power rankings. They have stayed there, obviously, but they haven't really risen very much. They're like 7th now. Georgia, Alabama, and Ohio State have basically been co-number ones, just kind of jockeying back and forth in my projections, as well as the polls. And the gap is closed certainly a bit, or narrowed, I should say, not closed, obviously, 2-touchdown or double-digit favorite. But I guess, my projections are still a little skeptical that Tennessee is quite on that same level with Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So do have Georgia's a pretty clear favorite in all three models. As far as to answer the other question, how are the numbers doing? Last 3 weeks, quite good. Prior to that, not as much. We've been, 3 weeks in a row of 53% and a half or better in the traditional model, including a 60% week in there. But I mentioned that huge hole we dug. We're in the 45s basically through the first 3 weeks of the season. So had a lot of work to do, hovering right around 50% now. But traditionally, because I do injury updates and things like that, and do the player specific projections, some of the other models out there, can't quite capture a quarterback injury like a Devin Leary or things like that. Talia Tagovailoa might be out this week. Those are big things that a lot of the projection models just aren't built to adjust to. We do a little bit better chance of that, and over the last 4 or 5 years, however long I've been doing this, through the course of the year, it traditionally gets better and better. I usually just don't have quite as big a hole to climb out of early on.
Yeah. So Brandon, just hanging on the side, me and Nick are going to grab some coffee and have a good conversation.
You're good, man.
I got a note. Tennessee, Georgia. Your models say somewhere around 6.5 to 9.5, depending on which one you want to go off of. What does Nick's heart say?
So I don't know if
I don't buy heart.
I don't.
He doesn't have a heart.
No.
Strictly in numbers.
So I will say I don't know. I haven't been super vocal about this publicly. I don't know if I can get my my thing all the way over there.
There's a Brew McCoy jersey in the corner as well.
Is that
there's a diploma hanging on the wall over there, actually, from the University of Georgia. So
there we go.
Art-wise, it's
our goal is to make Jared sweat. It's not working.
I do have to root for the alma mater a little bit, but I'm not I'm not a big fan. Just in general, I do kind of, if the numbers say Georgia's going to lose by 2 touchdowns, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. So I just go whatever the projections say. That's where my rooting interest is for that week.
But if Dartmouth's on the table, yes, Nick will cheer with his heart for some.
That's my closest Division I team. With my first college football game in 4 or 5 years the other week. And
did you enjoy it?
I did.
Good times.
I did. It was good.
Tailgating was pretty good. I always wonder about the tailgating there in Dartmouth.
That particular Friday night, there wasn't a whole lot of tailgating.
It was not busting then.
But if you go for homecoming, I've been to a couple of Dartmouth games. The homecoming, they do the big bonfire on the campus green. It's it's fun. College football is definitely more than just the top tier that we spend most of our time talking about. Yeah. There's fun to be had all over.
It's a pure tailgate, it's just like a good old fashioned, good fun. It doesn't have to be some crazy 80,000 people and
it doesn't have to be that to be a mega thing or anything like that. No, not whatever. I do want to point out for our Georgia fans, just to make you sweat, just one win. They always are giving up one big play per game, and it's usually to the biggest guy. So if this is, it might be Tillman if he's back. It could be Jalen Hyatt ascending again as well. I'm just pointing out that Georgia gives away one good play this year. It's not, this is still a kind of rebuilding Georgia, even though Georgia doesn't rebuild, they just replace, right? So, but I'm interested to see if maybe some of those numbers on the sheet and show where Tennessee might, even if it's the 9-point underdogs, that they still might have that chance there. I know they got, we like to, use Nick stuff. He has VGR, which is for Madden fans, it's pretty much like video game rating. So it gives you the particular ones. It's based on experience. It's based on their transfer. And then of course their rating coming out of high school and stuff like that. So I'm always interested to see those mismatches and see if there's one in between. There's got to be at least one receiver, whether it's Hyatt or Tillman, maybe it's Brew, to where they have a good mismatch against at least one of the defenders there in Georgia that could break a play. So I'm interested in that. So definitely go check out Nick's stuff there over at CFB Winning Edge. Support the Patreon, multiple tiers. Nick, if you want to give them real quick, and then we'll move on. But
just patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. There are 3 tiers there. Really, only 2 of them are open. Tier 1 is just sort of hey, we want to support the work you do. We do hire freelance for some off-season projects that helps to fund that. And then tier 2 is more the share all those in-depth spreadsheets in addition to the team profiles, which are the updated depth charts and injury reports, all that good stuff. We do have the returning production database that Chris was sort of alluding to, and then do have preseason statistical projections as well, which include CFF and DFS scoring. Unfortunately, at this point, I'm not quite built to be able to update those week to week. So those are just sort of done in the preseason, and then just sort of put them out there, and they basically stay static. Maybe in future years, hopefully, we'll be able to do a little bit more of those updating. But there's a ton of information in there, all sorts of coach-related info, pace, projected pace, matchups, all kinds of good stuff. So if folks are interested in joining at tier 2, definitely have a lot to offer that you can take a look and hopefully find some value in. And we're always looking to improve, not just our performance, whether it's against the spread, grading our projections, but also just offer more and do a better job, do it quicker, get it out there earlier in the preseason, get everything updated as quickly as we can. So that support really does help. That money doesn't just go into my pocket. It does a lot of the time go toward bringing in some folks to help us do a better job and get some projects done quickly.
Yes, and we're going to put those said spreadsheets to the test. And first, we're going to start with Campus Picks. Of course, that is presented by Prize Picks. Like I said, we have just me and Kay this week, but it's good because we got some stuff to talk about. So we have both an Holton Ayler sighting, which we need to be careful because he lives close by. So if we talk about him too much, he'll slide in DMs because he likes to look at his mentions all the time. So I'm just going to go ahead and point that out right now. But I like the thought process here, and Nick will use what he has as far as ECU versus UCF coming up to kind of gauge this as well. So Chris, you decided that you wanted to go with the passing yards of 275, and you have more for him, whereas I decided to go projection for fantasy score. That is 292.5, and he's only done that a few times, but against UCF, there is a bit of a mismatch. UCF is a little bit tougher against the quarterback, and I'll let Nick speak on that a little bit as well. So I have him a bit under 22.5. Chris, is it more like, hey, you're just you're not really looking at his fantasy points, you're really just hoping that Ayler's balls out, gives it to C.J. Johnson, looking for Isaiah Winstead? Is that the thought process here going into this weekend?
I think he's just slinging it a little bit here, right? And I don't want to worry about touchdowns. Keaton Mitchell's back.
Yep.
He's looking ripe. And, I don't want to worry about it, right? In like the last 3 games, he's done it. He's cleared it for sure. And he's got the craziest of stat lines.
Yes.
He had 1 touchdown, 6 touchdowns. I don't want to worry about that. Give me the yardage. Let's move on. UCF, I think this has the potential for a really fun game, a great game stack. Hopefully it's in the night slate. He's got very capable receivers. C.J. Johnson could go for 200 in a heartbeat. Winstead's been very great. I like the yards. I can see why you would want to go under because it's a touchdown dependent type situation. I don't have any issue with the under there on the 22.5 fantasy points, but it comes to yardage, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to be good to throw, especially because like UCF, right? They're going to score, they're going to move, they're going to be productive, right? We saw that last week with Plumlee scoring 34 touchdowns. So in that situation, I could see ECU having to just garbage time fantasy points, right? Yardage, especially. I leaned more on that passing yardage for sure.
Yeah. For me, it's I'm looking at projected fantasy scores, and it always comes down to and especially in the AAC, and I've seen ECU up close a few times when they go up against their tougher opponents in the AAC. That's where Ayler starts to decline a little bit. There was that one season where he was like, a top 10 CFF quarterback, and it just didn't matter who he played his lights out. But since then, he's kind of gradually done the roller coaster ride that we're talking about. So we'll move it over to Nick. Nick, I know you probably got the differences between UCF and ECU. I know DraftKings in particular it was Fantrax that's showing that UCF, I believe, and they're showing they're 33rd against the quarterback, but you might have a little bit more detail. So what's your thoughts about the matchup between UCF's defense versus Ayler's in his passing there?
Well, the first thing that jumps out to me, it's not, I guess, super relevant to just this particular question on Ayler's, but I did an update for my power rankings as I do every week, and UCF has just jumped overall team strength. They have played like a top 10 team in recent weeks, and have gotten to the point where they're basically a top 15 team in college football, highest ranked G5 team in my power rankings, which was a surprise to me. I didn't quite realize that they had been playing quite that well. In this matchup specifically, one of the things that, I said UCF's playing like a top 10 team. One number that I lean on pretty heavily, I call team performance. It includes, dozens of advanced stats kind of go into everything. And what I want to do in a lot of my numbers, you mentioned, VGR, video game rating. I want to keep everything kind of on that scale because I think a lot of us are familiar with, Madden, the old NCAA football game, and it sometimes is easy to get lost in things like net points per drive or yards per pass attempt against and things like that. So I wanted to put one basic rating to kind of hopefully encapsulate how well a team is playing overall. That's overall team performance. Offensive team performance, defensive team performance. Do break it out against the passing and rushing. And UCF, top 10 team overall. Defensively, they played like a top 25 team. They're 23rd in defensive team performance. Against the pass, they're top 40. Against the run, right around 40. So, there are no major weaknesses, and they're certainly a very talented team, a good team. East Carolina is, similarly, I think, pretty balanced. They're a top 50 team overall in team performance. They're 50th in offensive team performance, 43rd passing, 34th on the ground. And that, I think, is kind of the interesting piece to this, right? Ehlers does have some ability to run. My preseason projections expected him to have 5 touchdowns by the end of the year. Based on your scoring, 6 points per touchdown or 4 points per touchdown, had him projected between 26.5 and 23.5 points per game fantasy wise. Some of that is relying on that rushing total. Did have him projected for 250 pass yards roughly per game. I would say that this matchup is probably a little on the lower end, certainly one of the more talented defenses that he is going to play, in a unit that's playing, pretty well. But also, they've got Keaton Mitchell and hated to see the season-ending injury to Rajah Harris, and certainly, depth at running back might kind of limit ECU's play calling, might not lean on the rushing game quite as much, or if they do, might actually ask Ehlers to do. Is it Ehlers or Allers? Anyway,
depends on where
I've heard both, but
we call them Ehlers. Up north, we call them Allers. It just depends, man. Yeah.
But I mean, good receiver core to work with. Winstead's off to a great start this year. CJ Johnson's looked a little bit, at times, kind of like he did as a freshman. But I wonder, is this the type of game where East Carolina's at a talent disadvantage, playing a team that operates at a really fast pace? Are they going to try to slow it down a little bit, keep the game close, get into the fourth quarter with maybe a 1-score game, have an opportunity to win it late? My sort of gut tells me a little bit that maybe they are going to lean on Mitchell. Maybe they're going to lean on Ehlers a little bit more in the run game, which, certainly could help the fantasy points output if he's able to punch it in a time or two on the ground, but also opens them up to maybe get, knocked out or something like that. So I don't necessarily have a huge read one way or the other. Like I said, those full season projections would be under the 275. And I kind of foresee a little bit of more of a ground-based game. But Chris, you mentioned, I mean, he has been slinging it lately, so it's been working, pretty well. East Carolina's been an improved team in a lot of ways, and offense is a big part of that. And they might need his arm, to win. So don't have a great read. I'm sure that. Maybe
I think Brandon. I think he's saying that we're both wrong here. By the way,
I think so. Yeah, I guess I can do this. I can talk myself in and out of anything.
No, you're good.
But I guess just sort of I could see. I don't know this. I guess this wouldn't be one that I would try to find.
You don't have a strong feel. You don't have a. I think we've talked about this in the past. Like a lot of these prize picks are like you have to kind of have a strong feel. You have to catch it early, and if you like it, you hit it right. I was thinking about this morning. It felt like everything last week was just over or more, right? Like everybody had this phenomenal, amazing day. So part of me is like, did we just keep riding it and just whenever you like something, you just go more on? Like it just feels interesting because there were just so many points, so many incredible performances this past weekend that like it almost feels like, do we think that the more stays hot, the over stays hot? So it'll be interesting.
That's a good segue because the reason why I'm taking the next guy, which is Death Taxes and Mo Ibrahim getting a touchdown, regardless of defense, like Illinois' #1 rushing defense, it did not matter. He still went for 19.5 fantasy points. Now he's going up against Penn State. And Chris, you got to see the Michigan-Penn State game. Apologies to our friend Ethan, who's not there to defend his Nittany Lions.
I think that's the
But
reason why he's not here, to be honest. But that's
I
just
mean, I
me.
would be mourning too. That was rough to see. But heck, man, Blake Corum, Donovan Everett just running all over the place, and I don't think Penn State's going to stop that when you have one of the best guys here in the entire conference coming in, and with Achilles that's made of possibly gold now. I'm not sure. Like, it's looking really, really good. I don't see any flaws other than he was just a little bit banged up the week before there. But I'm going to go more. I think 20.5 is an easy one for him, especially what we saw out of Corum and Edwards. I'm thinking this one would probably be more of an easier smash than say Ehlers, which is more like what we call the great value Walmart, where it's like it's just priced too right. Like you might not want to play with it, but I like that. And then Chris, you went over here with Quentin Johnson, but you left me in the dark here. You left me guessing.
I have it in my head. I wanted to see what you thought I would take. What are you thinking I'm taking here? What are you guys both thinking I'm taking here? It's 5.5 receptions, and I did not select it.
And it's Kansas State. So you just said that you're riding overs, and I know Quentin Johnson has finally showed up after 6 weeks, finally, right? So past 7 and now 8. From what I'm seeing, Kansas State's a little rougher. I'm thinking you might take the less. You might surprise me, or are you taking more and just riding the hot fire of Quentin Johnson?
I'm taking more. I mean, I'm taking more.
Okay.
I am a firm believer that Nate is really smart, so I'm going to keep riding it. I'm going to just keep riding it here. Nate Marquise, said, "Hey, it's time."
Yeah,
Quentin's gonna pop
shares,
and he has, and I got to give him mad props for that. So I'm riding it. I think 5.5 is way too low. TCU. I just was looking at. It's incredible. All they've done is score 38 plus points, right? Like, and they throw it 35 times a game. There's no reason for him not to hit that number, unless Max Duggan is just absolute worst, right? Like, if he goes 15 for 35, then we're in trouble, right? But like, he hasn't come anywhere near that. So I really like this one. He's had 8 and 14 catches for 180 and 206 yards and a touchdown. I mean, it's just incredible how good he's been. No reason to think that Kansas State's gonna slow him down enough.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, man, I was literally like a week away from in redraft dropping Quentin Johnson. That's how bad I was, like, really struggle busting. Like, he was on the bench, and then we had it was one of those come to Jesus meeting. And then finally Nate was, I don't know, maybe messaged Quentin. He's like, "Hey, you gonna play football this season?" And he finally just showed up. I'm not sure what he did, but he just called his shot, and now he's been doing really good as well. Nick, I'm interested in seeing the matchup because I know Kansas State can cause some problems to some offenses as well. But what do you think about this matchup against a Sonny Dykes system versus Kansas State this year?
Well, so Quentin Johnson is one of my very favorites. I mean, he is just so fun to watch. Matchup nightmare. Incredibly athletic for his size. I mean, he's a little lanky, I guess, at times, but I don't know. He's just one of my very favorite wide receivers. So I was incredibly excited to see him break out over the last couple of weeks. That TCU offense was really doing well, even when he wasn't heavily involved. But they are basically one of the best in the country now that he's back up to full strength, full speed, what have you. TCU ranked 6th in offensive team performance, 8th passing, and actually, oddly enough, this kind of surprised me. They're number 1 in rushing offensive team performance, and so they're just a very efficient run game, really just a very efficient offense as a whole. That said, and this kind of applies to the Ibrahim pick as well. One, I tend to lean under, whether it's a total on a game or a full season yardage or I guess even these picks. I think I'd rather be on an under or a less rather than a more. All things equal, I'd probably rather be on the under. My case for Johnston, one, he has been great the last 2 weeks, but been a little inconsistent this year. Also, Kansas State plays pretty good defense. They're 20th in defensive team performance against the pass. They're 18th in overall defensive team performance. But one thing that I look to also, mentioned it a little on the last one as well. I look at the opponent's offensive pace, and Kansas State similar to what I kind of see ECU maybe doing. They might be playing keep away offensively. They operate at the 98th quickest pace in college football. They're about 28 seconds between offensive plays. They have a history of, just sort of melting the clock, trying to limit possessions, try to ugly up games a little bit. So that worries me a little bit. Not only have they been playing like a top 20 defense, not only are they a top 20 defense against the pass, at least the way I grade it, they, can do some things offensively to frustrate, the opponent's opportunities and things of that nature. Play keep away, make things a little ugly. I know Deuce Vaughn was a little bit banged up. Is that going to change how explosive they're going to be able to be offensively? Limit their own quick possessions if he's not able to break off 75-yard runs or 60-yard catch and runs, things like that. So I think I would lean under in part because I just kind of don't really like K-State as a matchup in the way that they can manipulate the game and the possessions and things like that TCU is going to be able. That they're going to have.
So, Chris, I think you should go last now.
I'm standing strong on my Quentin. No, I think a lot of it makes sense.
More too, so yeah, I feel
it's hard because this is what makes college fantasy football so hard. Is that like Kansas State is going to want to slow it down? I think without a doubt. ECU probably will. I don't. It's a little bit different. And, you have Adrian Martinez, you can't really throw it all that well compared to Ehlers, right? Like there's a difference, right? So Kansas State definitely wants to slow it down, but the problem is one of two things is going to happen. They're going to slow it down, then we're in trouble, Quentin Johnson fans, right? But if they don't do it well, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be real quick offensively in terms of those drives, and then TCU is going to feast. So there's this huge. It's tough, right? Like it's one or the other is going to happen. I think Kansas State's definitely going to try to slow it down. It's more a matter of like how effective it is. Do they, we've seen guys get 40-50% of targets, and I think Quentin's that type of guy. So I think we have an out in a sense there. Yeah. So we'll see. It's the Big 12. I mean, crazy shit happens in the Big 12.
Yes,
right?
Yes,
it's awesome, but crazy shit happens in the Big 12.
As well as the AAC as well. So you can expect pandemonium and mayhem as it goes. But let's move on. We're going to do bank on them. Of course, that is our DFS picks. It's presented by DraftKings. And we got some really good matchups. And I wanted to kind of point out and just tell, just to give Nick thing, pretty much the price point is basically what you're looking for is the production of fantasy points you wanted to try to hit. At least we wanted to hit, 3-4 times full, but you at least want to double it. We kind of do is I don't have Ethan on to give you the proper percentage number or how he does his math there, but the goal is to try to find it for the value that you have. And sometimes you'll play up on a player or the price will be higher, but it's worth it because they match that price type situation, if that makes sense. So what we're looking at mainly is the same thing that you do on your sheets. You're looking for mismatches. You're just looking for a cheaper play, but a better situation, or they're just on a hot streak. So looks like Quinn Ayers, the King Quinn there, as Mr. Matt Bruning, as he's listening. Tomorrow he'll hear. But Quinn is really good price point, $6,400. Going to OK State. We just saw what happened with OK State and our friends there at TCU and another Quentin Johnson game. So, of course, I'm looking at the stack, Xavier Worthy, and I think, Chris, you're on that as well. I almost looked at Whittington too. I almost thought about a game stack, but I decided to go against it a little bit. So same process with you, man. Just great matchup. OK State, not blocking anything, and you're just ready to rock and roll with Texas this week.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's Big 12, right? We just said it. Crazy stuff happens.
Crazy.
I think I said it last week in my article. TCU Oklahoma State didn't have the big total that I think people were looking for, and I said this is going to be a fun game. This is going to be high scoring. It wasn't as high scoring as the other ones. Come to find out, even at 43-40. Right. But I think this one has the potential. And I don't know if Oklahoma State has the best run back of options. to go against that Texas offense. I think on Texas, you can say Ewers, Worthy, Sanders, even Whittington, but obviously Bijan, all great options in some way or form or fashion. Oklahoma State's got Sanders, but I'm telling you, I think one of these next 2 weeks he's going to be out. You know, you hear these dinged up, banged up type situations.
Yeah.
He's super physical. So I don't know how much I want to bank. Go figure. Bank on him and, you know, have him in a ton of my lineups. But yeah, that was my thought was Ewers and Worthy clearly have a connection. They've been awesome together. They showed it last week. They had it against Bama. They had like this rainbow moonshot pass. I just remember a 50-yard pass that he caught, Worthy caught. I can't forget. And talent is just so much and so there. And I think in a matchup that could go super high scoring, I really like that for sure.
Yep. So Nick, you're probably taking a look at this as well. I would put it this way: is this the biggest difference between an offense versus a defense, as far as one side being lopsided versus the other? Do you think this is probably the ideal matchup between the two, or do you have you seen others as you're looking this week that might be even a better matchup versus other than just Texas and OK State?
Well, so I do like the matchup for Texas versus Oklahoma State. The fact that Quinn Ewers is playing incredibly well right now. Worthy was, has obviously been so good his entire career, but really seems to be kind of blossoming right now. Texas is a top 10 team, top 5 in a lot of the numbers that I pay a lot of attention to. They're just analytically a really, really good team right now, and a lot of that is on offense, and especially with a healthy Ewers, that pass game is going to be it's definitely going to have an opportunity to shine against an Oklahoma State defense that ranks 91st in defensive team performance against the pass, 55th defensively overall. Yeah, I think that's a good matchup. Another one that I see here that maybe intrigues me just a touch more is UCLA and Oregon. I mean, the total's 70.5. And both of those offenses grade incredibly, incredibly well in my numbers. I mean, both are top 5, which is, obviously pretty rare for a single game matchup. But even factoring in Oregon's just horrible start to the season against Georgia, they grade really, really well. Offensively, second in offensive team performance overall, number 3 rushing, which is a surprise given, the running back pecking order hasn't quite worked out the way a lot of us thought it would preseason. UCLA, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is playing like a 5th-year starter at quarterback, and I think finally blossoming, finally becoming that player that a lot of folks thought he could be as such a highly rated recruit. But both of these defenses are far from dominant. UCLA is mediocre, top 60 in defensive team performance overall. They're right around 40 against both the pass and the run. But Oregon, and some of this is certainly takes into account that Georgia game, but they rank 81st in defensive team performance overall, 93rd against the pass. So this does seem like a back and forth, high scoring, certainly one of the highest totals on the board. So I would certainly, in addition to the Texas and Oklahoma State, but maybe even more so, that matchup, I think intrigues me the most.
Yeah, I think that's why we see Bo Nix probably at the highest rate at 9,800. That was a lot. We were trying to get what we call Nick Bo, where we just play Bo Nix. We don't play any of his receivers, and he just lets it roll, right? But 9,800 is pretty steep. But from what Nick's saying, it sounded like, if you could squeeze some other options in there that are cheap options, then Bo might be a good, decent play as well. But I do love some DTR this week against Oregon. I got some Jake Bobo. Chris, you're the Jake Bobo guy.
I love Jake Bobo. Yeah,
just too expensive for you this week, or you just saw Zay Flowers over there 5,900. You're like, I gotta have some Zay.
He's a lot of our projections rely on volume, which makes a lot of sense, right? Like that's just a clear, obvious thing, right? And Bobo just doesn't get the huge target numbers that you want, and he's priced pretty aggressively for his volume.
Yes.
So I love Bobo. It's just super hard, right? Like what becomes very difficult, and the perfect example of this is Javonte Williams and was it Michael Carter from 3 years ago or whatever, right? Like their touchdown rates were so ridiculous. I can't justify a 20% TD rate as a running back, right? But like that's what Javonte Williams was doing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what becomes very difficult. And Bobo, I think he's got 5 touchdowns on like 38 targets, which I can't put him at 14%. Like I just don't see that happening over a full season. So I can't project that this week. That happens with a lot of guys, and he projects it to, I think, like 16 points for me, which is like really pretty decent. I see myself getting, I do a bunch of like 150 lineup stuff, and I see myself around like 8 to 10%. But that's about as much as I'm going to get just because of the volume. I like him a lot. I think, like Nick said, the matchup's great. The total is great. This has, the full very likelihood of a 45-42 type game, like the total suggests. But projections tend to play to the median, so it's a little bit hard to play Bobo at that price.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that, and I should have said this much earlier, DFS is certainly not my strong suit. So I could be an idiot for whatever I'm going to say here. My apologies. But I'm looking through, potential options, and I'm intrigued a little by, are there some cheaper guys that might be able to supplement, if we're going to go for Knicks, who might we be able to kind of match him up with a little bit. Troy Franklin's, probably too expensive, but maybe Chase Cota has had, some moments here, there. He's at 48 on DraftKings that, might provide a little bit of value there. I mentioned that the running back pecking order didn't quite, pan out quite how a lot of us expected, but it seems to me that it is starting to, the picture is starting to clear up a little bit, and Bucky Irving seems to be that, number one guy. He's not going to get a huge work load, but at, what is he listed here at 55, a little bit below Maccabee, who you have here, Purdue, against a traditionally, pretty strong. I know they're struggling this year, but Wisconsin defense, that might intrigue me as a potential option there, especially since it seems, based on the last game or two, maybe pricing hasn't quite caught up to the fact that he seems to be emerging as a little bit more of that every down or at least early down type running back there for Oregon. I don't know.
Yeah, you're definitely catching on to something, because a lot of times DraftKings, they're a little bit lazier with or they just don't catch up as fast. So the goal is to find, that guy that's completely underpriced that needs to be way higher. He just has, one, a great matchup, two, he's just producing. DraftKings really hasn't caught on that he's like the wide receiver 2 or the wide receiver 1 or the running back 1 and stuff like that. So you're definitely onto that as well. That also brings me to, matchup is everything. And that's what we're talking about. And just like you talked about Maccabee out of Purdue, out of all people, Chris, did you expect Maccabee to be the starting, the guy that stands out at Purdue when you have Kobe Lewis and you have Doru that's been there for a while, man? It's pretty interesting.
I actually, funny enough, I drafted Kobe Lewis in some, I don't remember what league it was, a best ball in the offseason. And I used Maccabee thinking I was clever because like Kobe Lewis, Maccabee, like it kind of like went together. But hey, volume matters. The guy is really good in pass game. He's taken advantage of it. I really liked him last week. He paid off. I think he was like Big Ten Freshman of the Week or something like that, right?
Right.
So he's taking advantage of it. Wisconsin matchup is not as intimidating as it used to be.
Not at all.
Purdue offense moves it pretty well, so I like them. I think my projections have a hard time because they underpriced a bunch of really good running backs, as like you probably see in my lineup.
Yep.
But I could have seen in an alternative world where pricing is a little bit more like, it feels like Maccabee's price is perfect. Like that's exactly the right price. But like you look at Braylon Allen and Valladay and Charbonnet and even Filkins and McClellan, Tajay Spears, Josh Will, like there's literally everybody feels underpriced besides him, which, you know, maybe they have a vendetta against the Maccabee family. I haven't looked too deep into the draft.
Oh, wow.
Hierarchy, but
one thing, and this is sort of my wheelhouse a little bit more, personnel wise, Duro's been out for most of the year, right?
Right.
He was suited up last week, was told he'd only play in an emergency situation, ended up playing a handful of snaps. I'm not saying that he's, you know, back and fully healthy and going to be the top guy on the depth chart this year or this week, but it seems like, you know, he actually got on the field last week. Might he eat into Maccabee's touches and snaps a little bit?
I think he
works himself back into the, you know, playing shape.
I didn't watch the game for obvious reasons. There was like a million good games. I wasn't going to stick on Purdue, but I think Maccabee got banged up at a certain point, and I wonder if that's when we maybe saw Doru. But I think you're right? Like maybe we see him eat into that a little bit, right? Like if Doru's back, I don't want Maccabee, right?
Right.
But like at this early in the week, we're kind of playing with a tough draw here because there's some injuries. There's a bunch of really relevant injury situations. Texas Tech passing game specifically is one that comes to mind. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
I also want to point out our friend Chuck Sizzle, of course, you know, Charlie Jones for those that don't like the nickname of Chuck Sizzle. He is banged up, so I don't know. It's a game time decision is what they're calling for. Plus, Aiden O'Connell, and Wisconsin at least has a little bit of a tougher passing defense, so I think they kind of go with the run. So even if it is a full-on onslaught with Doru and Maccabee, that's kind of thinking that I had is like, hey, if Chuck Sizz is out, you know, maybe Maccabee kind of takes up the slack on the run. They have that mismatch that they can kind of, you know, expose and kind of do that as well. But that was the part. But Chris, you also got, you know, our boy Braylon Allen. Of course, you got the opposite side. Same thing. Purdue's not really blocking much when it comes to the run game. Braylon Allen, when he has softer opponents, he just runs through them. 7,400 is probably the best I've seen him priced in a while.
Makes no sense.
Just because the 1 or 2 games that he struggled. And that was it, right?
Yeah, it makes no sense. Personally, like he struggled against Illinois. They fired the coach. He's been awesome since, and was awesome in all of 2021 and before, right? Like, so I really like this play. You should use him in all formats. There's absolutely no reason, right? Like, I think Wisconsin's the favorite by 4 points, maybe. Like, this one feels like a no-brainer. Almost feels like too easy.
Yeah, I definitely think it's like almost like a free square where you just kind of want to throw them in there as well. I do have a surprise Wisconsin wide receiver. I know that as well, but Dyke, the one guy, 147. Purdue ain't stopping the wide receiver. We're seeing Mertz out of nowhere starting to pass the ball a bit more. Do you think Graham Mertz is back to that 5-star, or did he lose him? He's still at a 3-star. What are you thinking with that? That's an interesting. I'll ask Nick here after this, but I'm interested in the new coaching style there. It seems like there's a little bit more of a boost in the offense in general. What do you think, Chris?
I have nothing positive to say about.
Is it a rivalry thing?
I'd say DK, just trying to make him spice him up a little bit. I have no idea if that's correct.
I think DK is correct.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's nothing positive I will say about him, especially at 6,000. But I mean, he literally had a game of 50 points 2 weeks ago. So like,
and he dropped
who's to say that's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So I can't fully write him off.
I just think it's a good one. I don't think he's going to be fairly used. So for me, it's a DK. You know, it's a DraftKings. It's a usage and percentage play there for me as well. Another one I did is Holmes there from Baylor. He's kind of looking more. I don't think he's like a Thornton type where he's huge or anything like that, but he is being looked at a little bit more. So for me, I'm hoping that people, CFF, I wouldn't say chase the points or anything like that, but in DFS, I think, Holmes got some KU. We're playing Kansas, right? Kansas, you can throw on them, you can run them, you can do a lot of stuff, but Kansas will fight back. So I'm expecting a pretty good game between Baylor and Kansas. So I'm hoping Holmes just gets in the mix and gets past what he was. Am I expecting another 200 yards? Probably not, no, but I definitely think he'd go past his 14 fantasy points. I think he's got a capability of possibly doubling that. So for 4,900, that's a steal,
I mean, he looked amazing, right?
He
like it wasn't just like a good stat line. He looked very good in that game, right? Like it was. I watched and I was like, oh my god, there's zero stopping this man, and really a lot of Baylor's passing attack, right? Like Shapen threw for like 275, and he got hurt in like the third quarter. But I don't know. It's always tough. Like, am I reading too much into one game? Was it just a good matchup, a bad DB? So, Nick, do you have any
big game? He had another big game earlier in the year. He's been kind of boomer bust. So, when it hits, obviously. I am a little worried about Shapen. Dave Aranda's a pretty straightforward kind of guy when he talks about injuries, and based on my interpretation of what he said, it was kind of like, well, we'll see. We'll see if he can play. And that to me, reads, okay, maybe it's 50-50 that he actually plays or not. And then that 50% that he plays, how close to 100% is he actually going to be if he's on the field? I really like drones long-term. I think he's a toolsy guy and made some throws that excite me, but obviously that horrible interception made some, decisions, maybe not great. So I'm a little worried that Holmes is kind of that guy who can blow up one week and kind of disappear the next, even though I do like the matchup, but I'm a little worried about the quarterback situation with that one specifically. So I don't know. Apparently I'm just a huge pessimist. I'm like saying why I don't like everything.
What are your thoughts on, while we were talking about, we'll call him DK then, what's your thoughts on Wisconsin recently? Do you like the possible new coach that they're talking about, the assistant coach that's taken over? What do you like there? And do you think it fits with the pieces that they have, especially with finally they have Mertz? They might not have him very much longer, but, they got some really good pieces, especially with Braylon Allen here in the next, another year easily, possibly 2 years. So what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I absolutely love Braylon Allen. I mean, he's maybe my favorite running back to watch, not named Deuce Vaughn or Jahmyr Gibbs, I guess. But I, personally struggle a little bit to rely on a Wisconsin receiver. I don't, in my individual player ratings, it's very, very rare that I actually downgrade a player's rating. But I just had to do it with Graham Mertz. I mean, he just has not lived up to that talent projection. I use 247 Sports kind of as the baseline. And he was, fringe 5-star, right? And just has not played like that, even though he's a 3-year plus starter. So I don't necessarily trust DK. I mean, he had the huge game, but one, it was against Northwestern, which, not exactly, a matchup, this week, Purdue, even though they're not necessarily an elite defense, I would say certainly a tier above Northwestern. And then other than that, there's not been very much. Certainly he's come on the last 3 weeks, been more involved. That is certainly a good sign. But I personally, I am a little scared that so much of his production came in that one game, but two, that just I'm not a big believer in Wisconsin other than Allen. I don't necessarily trust that offense, even though I will say, when a coach gets fired, you do sometimes see, and I think that Northwestern game was that next one, right? You kind of see that, all right, we're gonna change things up, we're gonna do something different, and that doesn't always stick. And so I worry about that a little bit as well, that they'll kind of fall back into more of the pattern, the plan that they've had in the past, and just kind of lean on Allen, and I'd probably do that too. I mean, I think he's one of the best running backs in college football. So I'd probably look for a different option, but that 10 for 185 and 3 touchdowns is definitely, we know that that's possible with DK. So it certainly is intriguing, but I wonder that it might have been just sort of a 1 week wonder kind of thing, and he'll kind of fall into that 1 for 9, 2 for 35 that we saw in the first half of the year. That's probably a little bit closer to what we're going to see week in and week out than 10 for 185 and 3 again.
I gotcha. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about these running backs real quick. And I know, Chris, you kind of touched on it briefly. Pricing just really good. Are you even thinking about maybe some lineups with the super flex being just running back, or are you that confident with the running backs, or is it just play all your studs that are all these lower prices all of a sudden?
No, I'll be majority 2 quarterback for sure. I mean, always, right? Like if you think about it, there's 100% for quarterback and 100% for super flex when you're building lineups, and I'm usually around 180 2 quarterbacks. So definitely think I'll be staying there. I mean, there are a lot of great options, right? But like, what does a running back have to do to get to like 40 points? It's kind of crazy. But you look at a quarterback, it's not as hard to get there, right? Because they have the football lines literally every play, right? So I love the running backs. I think Valladay is a high usage guy against Stanford. That makes a lot of sense. Charbonnet is about as good as it gets from a running back perspective. He's hit basically like 28 points plus in the last 3 games, and he's done it 2 different ways. Like he's done it with like 9 carries, and he's done it with like 25 carries. So that's always nice to see. Filkins, did I mention him earlier? From Stanford, he's like getting like 75% of carries, which at that point, you tell me a guy's going to get 20 carries plus for 5,800. I have a hard time not using a lot of that. So there are a lot of great running backs. I think some of it will depend on format. I think Filkins is not your tournament play, whereas I think a guy like Allen and Charbonnet and even Valladay here are great in all formats. So I think it gets a little specific on what are you actually playing. Because like Josh Williams is an awesome 3K option at running back. McClellan is a great $6,100 option, but those are tournament plays. Like those are guys that have some risk to them, some sketchiness to them. So while these 3 are great in all tournament options, Filkins would be amazing cash game option. I think there's some differences there on the format that really play a part here.
Yep. I do want to bring up McClellan. I do have him in the lineup, and then we'll move to our main event, which is Jackson Dart and LSU, and I'll have Nick kind of break down what he thinks of Ole Miss versus LSU there. But I like McClellan. Well, first, Ben Bryant, I believe he's injured. He's not playing, so we're going to see Evan Prater become the quarterback there, which I think that's
all real.
So he had a concussion. It's questionable, and yeah, I wouldn't say he's out, but
it leans that way. Wow.
Yeah, for now it leans. So, all right. So they have Corey Kiner, which actually, we're expecting him just to take over this backfield. He hasn't. So Montgomery has been banged up, but then, it comes to the line that hasn't been the producer that we thought. So out of nowhere, now the 3rd string McClellan has come up and has produced the most, going, 18.3 fantasy points per game and stuff like that. So that's my mindset is like, if it is Evan Prater, he's going to need like a soft open to kind of get it in there because we haven't seen him since the spring game really. And that's about it. So I'm kind of leaning on McClellan and the run game. I'm thinking you could probably play Kiner in some lineups here and there, even though he's a little bit more expensive. Or no, he's only like what 5,900, 5,800, Chris. So he's like not too far under or something like that. So needless to say, I think both are good options for doing it. I just see McClellan as getting a better fantasy points per game, so he might be worth the extra 200 up to kind of spend along with there as well. So let's move on. I want to talk about, so Chris has Jackson Dart in the lineup, and of course he went with Watkins as wide receiver and against going LSU. What is your thought process with Dart? I know he's this GPP, so this tournament, so you want to take someone out of the ordinary. But do you think Dart's kind of putting it together? Do you see some progress there? Or you just like the matchup with LSU? What's your thoughts?
I think that could be a fun game. You know, hey, anybody that makes Anthony Richardson look good, you want to consider that quarterback, right?
Right.
Dart showed obviously legs last week, and also he also threw 19 times. What was it? 3 touchdown passes. Like, they're not throwing it 19 times again, right? Like, the likelihood of that actually happening again is very, very low. They killed Vanderbilt and they threw more than they passed, right? So I think there's the shot that people see the game log and get really confused about what to do. So I do like Dart. I'm confused a little bit on who I want to stack it with. I think you don't necessarily have to stack it because I don't think he has like a commanding receiver one. You know, Mingo, we thought was maybe the guy, and then he did nothing last week. Trigg, we talked about him for a while, then he got hurt for the season. Watkins, I think, is trending towards that really decent to good option, and at 4K, that's good enough for me. So that's why I went Watkins here. This will be a low on play, though. You know, this will be this won't be a big low ownership. There won't be a ton of people stacking this from an Ole Miss perspective right now. If you guys were to say your favorite or most thought of Ole Miss player, who would it be?
Matt Corral.
It'd be Judkins. It'd be Judkins.
Yeah, it'd be Quinchon, right?
This
year for sure. Yeah.
His price is not super aggressive. I like this as a kind of a pivot for sure. And I think Jaden Daniels is an awesome person to run back to play in that same lineup. And you see a random out of nowhere 42-39 type game.
So, Nick, seeing Mississippi versus LSU, and of course you have, the projections of how the game will flow. How do you see this kind of panning out? Do you think Dart gets this done with his arm, or is he more with his feet? What's your thoughts here this week against LSU?
I've been a little too high on LSU. My projections have been really high on LSU a lot of the year, and that started to even out a little bit, but my numbers absolutely love Ole Miss. Offensively, I mean, they're top 5 in offensive team performance. I like Dart. I think, as good as they've been running the football and with Judkins and with Evans, Dart is not as likely certainly to punch it in, but has running ability. We've seen him break off long runs in the past, get in the end zone. I think, like Chris said, you look up and somewhat unexpectedly, maybe this is a high scoring game, and maybe this is kind of the game where Dart gets a couple of lucky bounces with a QB sneak at the goal line, something like that, or breaks off a 50-yard run, and maybe we actually see that running ability and what he can do on the ground kind of reach that full potential here. That's not necessarily something you can bank on, but if you're looking for that high ceiling, I certainly still believe that Jackson Dart's got that. It's hasn't quite lived up to a lot of folks' expectations early in the preseason, but I think that ceiling is still there. So I definitely like it. And similar, you mentioned Daniels might be a similar play, and I think that makes sense too, because he certainly has that ability and to break off a long run, to score on the ground, in addition to we finally saw Butte get in the mix of things a little bit last week. Maybe the passing game is going to come along a little bit. Maybe both of the offenses are starting to pick up steam and play a little bit more to their full potential, and hopefully that'll pay off, with your case with Dart, but both quarterbacks hopefully as well.
Yep. So I want to bring up one more, and we got Zay Flowers. I know I brought him up briefly, so that's what Chris picked on there as well. I know Nick has been a fan of Zay Flowers. He likes the Boston College and Jerkovich and stuff like that as well. Do you think they can go blow to blow with Wake Forest and their high-octane offense, Chris? Do you think or is just as Zay being Zay because he's the top dog and the top target, and that's why we're shooting for 5,900?
Yeah, top target is really, really nice. The total is not great. It's like 20 and a half type situation. But when you're getting thrown the football 35% of the time, you you command so much volume that it makes too much sense. I would lean. This is one of those scenarios. I think I'd lean him a little bit more in cash games because I think his floor is so high. But he's just expensive enough where I don't know if I see 30 points out of him. You know, I don't know if I see 28 points out of him. But I think there's some other options out there that could hit that pretty, I won't say easily, but like have a higher likelihood. And I might lean that in tournaments, right? But they come with way more risk. You look at a Zay Flowers, I mean, that 20 points feels like a lock, right? It's like Bijan. You know, do I want to pay 9,400 or whatever it is for Bijan?
Yes.
Not really, but when you're pretty much guaranteed to get 25 fantasy points, it's kind of hard to say no. And he's kind of like that equivalent at like a mid-tier price and obviously a little bit lower on the projection level or side of things.
Yes, I think it's a good play. Nick, did you have any thoughts on Zay versus Wake? And do you think that game script, you know, they're going to have to probably pass from behind? So do you think he just gets peppered with 35% or more? I think there's a couple games I saw where he was getting like a 50% target share, which is ridiculous. So what's your thoughts on this game coming up?
Yeah, I mean, Boston College as a whole is just bad offensively. I mean, they're 122nd in offensive team performance. The running game is basically non-existent. So it's Zay Flowers and that's it. So I definitely think that the target share is going to be there. Wake Forest is maybe not quite as good of a matchup as it was last year. The defense has improved a little bit, but their weakest area is defending the pass. They're 84th in defensive passing team performance. So I do like the matchup. You know, my limited knowledge base seems like a decent value. I like Flowers, certainly, you know, as a player, talented player, explosive. So I think he's, even if, as he should be, the focus of the Wake Forest defense, has the ability to break a tackle and, you know, do a short catch and a long run type scenario and put up some good numbers, even, you know, if that offense as a whole struggles.
Brandon, permission to throw this completely off the train tracks.
Do it. Just
cool.
Make it BTR and go for it.
In my blood.
Yes,
just in one of my dynasty leagues, Zay Flowers was just traded. So I want to hear Nick's thoughts and yours as well, Brandon.
Sure.
This is the trade deadline's on Saturday, so things are getting a little weird. We have Zay Flowers and Quentin Johnson, hence why I have to bring it up. Both guys we just talked about today. For Robbie Ashford and Kobe Prentice. What are we thinking on that one? Because I have very strong feelings in my head.
So they're really banking on more probably the Kobe Prentice. I'm assuming they got to be pretty high on him as the future wide receiver one. That's interesting because I lean Isaiah Bond, and I think maybe I'll let Nick, you know, kind of do his thing and kind of give you the VGRs and stuff. But I don't know. I just think Bond is the more explosive one. So like Prentice is like he's there now, but there's plenty to go around. And Bond's that explosive type where he reminds me of Smith, you know, the Heisman guy that, you know, when given the opportunity with a full workload, it's interesting to me. I don't know how I feel about Ashford. It is that's interesting. It's very interesting. What you think, Nick?
I wouldn't be able to tell you if anybody in any of the leagues I'm in owns Robbie Ashford. So that was a bit of a surprise.
Is this the 50-teamer, Chris?
No, this is one of the original Dynasty leagues I'm in with Zach and Andrew. And I have Robbie Ashford in the league, but you shouldn't be surprised by that. I mean,
running
must be deep rosters then, huh?
Running potential, I think, is there, but Ashford as a whole, I'm not super excited.
There's a lot of risk in him too, I think. Like, is he even going to be the guy next year? We don't really know at all.
Right. Yeah. That seems like new coaching staff, transfers coming in, that sort of thing. I admittedly am not a recruiting guy, so I'm not, don't have a great read yet on sort of the up and coming Alabama pecking order. I do know that Prentice, you mentioned, is kind of been the guy now, and at least has played a lot, has gotten into the starting rotation, has gotten into the regular rotation. So me personally, that usually is a sign to me, just because I don't pay a ton of attention to recruiting. I don't necessarily have a great grasp on long-term upside. But this sounds like a trade I would make on the other side. It's like, oh, if I've got a shot to make the playoffs, yes, give me Johnston, give me Flowers, and yeah, you want Ashford, great. And sure, this freshman that I drafted and don't really know very much about, you can have him too. So this definitely sounds like something I would do and would be, happy with trying to make a run with two. One, I think Johnston still has elite ability. We got off to a slow start, but we've seen what he can do the last couple of weeks. Flowers, I think, is very limited by Boston College as a whole, but is going to be, consistent and pretty high floor. So somebody that I think would give me some depth and be comfortable with that return, me personally.
Yeah, and playing in a league with Nick in the same league in Dynasty, he's definitely a win now type of guy. He's done it in multiple trades, and
I got a shot.
Yeah, you
Sell
do, man. You smashed me good.
Take
by
all
20
draft
points
picks. You can take them. Freshmen, take them. Yep. I don't care.
I might give away my Le'Veon Moss shares and all kinds of good stuff there, the freshmen, just to do it, because I'm like middle of the pack. So I'm just like, I got to make some moves here pretty soon. So, so Chris, is that are you the one that's receiving Johnston?
No, it came through the inbox. It came through the inbox.
Okay.
So what's interesting to me, and I don't want to completely derail because I have a bedtime, is
you're good.
Do we see Bama receivers lose value next year? Because we saw Jalen Milroe, and it kind of feels like he's going to be the guy next year, presumably if and when Young.
I'll be honest with you.
Right, but like
he's got the inside track though.
He does.
Inside track, right? So like we would all agree that Milroe hurts the value of receivers, whereas do we think Simpson helps? Like comparing the two, if you have a Bama receiver, you want Simpson to be the quarterback, right?
Correct. Yeah, I do personally. I just think he fits that system. I get it. Like Bryce Young was hurt, so a lot of people like Milroe wasn't game plan. Like Saban didn't build it around Milroe's talents and capabilities. But Milroe's a stud. But I see Milroe being better at a place like Florida. Being like an AR type guy, like a Richardson type guy, in that type of scheme versus a Simpson who's a pocket guy. Reminds you of like a Mac Jones and those guys that were just gunning it, stuff like that. So guys like Isaiah Bond that can get out and catch it out of the flat real fast, or guys like Kobe Prentice that just towers over people. Those are the kind of the ones that you would look at, especially if Simpson takes over. But I don't know. The thing is, with Saban having a full off season, like he literally could change the offense the way to fit Milroe and his capabilities. But then you want to look at probably the run game, probably is like the shining star there next year. But we have the transfer portal too. So who's to say like a guy like Luther Burden, who, is getting banged up in Missouri and they don't know what they're doing with him, doesn't, say, hey, I'm just going to play at Bama. So
yeah, that's already a given.
Right.
We've already, my value on Burden is strictly with him at Bama. So we already know that's happening.
I hope so for my first round pick there in the Dynasty League that me and Nick are in. So we'll see what happens, because I gave away a third to get him a little bit faster. So we'll kind of go from there. But thank you for the Dynasty talk as well. We're sprinkling all kinds of good stuff, some CFF, some CFB, some DFS. We're doing it all tonight, and it's great. But we do want to thank Nick for coming on, man. Nick, if you can do one more time, just plug the Patreon, and then where they can find you if they have any questions.
Yeah, thanks again for you guys having me. And I'm not always great at explaining everything that we have to offer, but pretty easy to get in touch with if anybody has any questions. But patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. We've got 2 tiers. The first one is help us. One, we have a podcast and help us support that as well, but also help us to fund a lot of the off-season work that we do, projects that we're working on. Got a lot of fun things that I'm hoping to do this off season. And then tier 2, if you're interested in all those spreadsheets. So depth charts, injury reports, projected point spreads, totals for every game. Try to keep up on those sort of things as best as possibly can. Keep track of all sorts of talent metrics and stats, all kinds of great stuff. Coaching stuff, team performance, as I mentioned, matchup data. a wide range, lots and lots of stuff. So if anybody's interested in signing up, we'd certainly love the support. Patreon.com/CFB Winning Edge. You can find me on Twitter at CFB Winning Edge. Listen to our podcast, CFB Winning Edge podcast, or just reach out if you have any questions.
Yes, please go support them. It's worth it's like a cup of coffee just to get started there. Definitely worth its weight in gold. Chris, you're going to be sidelined for a little bit trying to get the nose back in order. Are you going to be writing any sweet articles with some cool titles while you're recovering, or is this completely off the grid for a couple of weeks and then we'll see you brand new?
Well, it's just the 1 week. Next week I'll be out. I can't foresee myself having the desire to write amidst congestion and all that.
Yeah, I feel you.
Article this week, 2 articles this week. I'm gonna continue with the main slate article for DraftKings, as well as like the core plays, tournament plays for the night slate on Saturday night on DraftKings. And then I'll be out for the week. Ethan will probably pick up a little bit of my slack, so I'll have to hit him maybe with the some Venmo or something. I don't know, little hat tip over there, but we'll see. But so expect 2 articles this week for sure before I head out for the Michael Jackson nose job.
Oh, man. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see it. Of course, I'm Brandon Sanders. You can find me at CFF University. We got this podcast going on. In a couple months, we'll see the return of the Future Freshman podcast. Of course, you see a lot more of Nick's work. I usually use a lot of his to kind of gauge the upcoming freshman versus the veteran class and things like that, and what you can expect from a player that's coming into a right opportunity and a right system. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And until next time, we'll see you next time. Peace.